This is the Daily Tech News for Thursday, April 24th, 2025. We tell you what you need to know, follow up on the context of those stories, and help each other understand.
Today, Sean Hollister tells us about toilet tech in Japan and more from your emails.
I'm Jason Howell.
I'm Huyen.
Let's start with what you need to know with the big story. All right, starting June 20th, 2025, all smartphones and tablets, well, most smartphones, we'll get to that in a second, sold in the European Union must display a new label inside the box with detailed information on battery life, energy efficiency, durability, repairability, and ingress protection. Each category will actually have a letter grade attached to it on a scale from A to G. Interesting. This is all part of updated EU regulations that are meant to make electronic devices more transparent, more sustainable for consumers. And we'll get to the sustainability part in a moment. But these new rules apply to smartphones, feature phones, cordless landline phones, which, okay, that's still a thing, and tablet devices with screens between 7 to 17.4 inches. Notably, rollable displays are exempt. So that's interesting because we don't really have a whole lot of rollable displays on these types of devices yet anyways. And devices already on the market prior to that date exempt. So it's kind of like on that date, starting from there, going forward, these rules come into play. There's more to this, but I want to stop right there. And just kind of see what you think about this. I mean, I think, consumer protection is always a good thing, but there's always the risk that it, could hamper innovation, as they like to say. What are your thoughts?
I really like this. I think, we hear about a lot about regulations and I guess initiatives like this from the EU, which, I think to give them a lot of credit, do work very hard at consumer protections across all kind of spheres in tech. Sometimes we very much disagree with what they do, and sometimes we more agree. I'm kind of a fan of this. And, I hate always bring up our other show, but we're talking about smartphones right now, so I can't help it. But, we talk a lot about the right to repair, and especially with the, kind of economic conditions, people are really looking to hold on to their phones. And I think this just plays right into that, right? And part of it is, rather than, I think, it's kind of giving consumers informed choice. And I feel like so many times we've gotten emails from folks that have gotten nice phones, mid-range phones, premium phones, and something just doesn't feel right. Like the battery doesn't last as long as they wanted to, or the battery seemed fine for the first 6 months and then totally just tanks. And this does put, I think, more burden on the manufacturers, I assume, to do this testing, to comply with these stickers, which, by the way, are very nicely read. Like there's a lot of icons, like the A to G are color graded. So it really feels like it's meant to make the characteristics of a phone much easier to interpret to like an average consumer, because I feel like, we're used to looking at these numbers and knowing sort of what IP, X8 or IP68 mean. Yeah. Ingress. What does that mean? Right. And I like the idea that they're trying to make it just at a glance a little bit easier for a consumer to know what they're buying. So I'm all for informed decision making, and I think this goes along very well with what people have very explicitly said and showed that they need, which is more choice in getting phones that are durable. So I'm all for it. I don't really have too many negatives to say about it, honestly, other than, yeah, sure, it'll make it more, it'll make it a little more work for OEMs. But I don't know. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree with everything you said. I think, an informed public about what they're buying and what it's capable of and what they can expect. I would never say that that's a bad decision. I think, consumers should have choice and should have be armed with the information to make that choice in a responsible way. Now, along those lines, the EU also announced new eco-design requirements that must be met in order to be sold in the region. This is where things get a little bit more aggressive, I think. Devices must be resistant to drops, scratches, dust, and water. Okay, how do you define that? I'm sure that seems like kind of a why. What is resistant? That it has some sort of resistance. Like a scratch resistant screen or whatever. Is there a minimum, maximum? I don't really know the detail on that from a specific sense, but that seems wide open. But batteries must last at least 800 full charge discharge cycles while still retaining 80% of their capacity. I applaud that. Manufacturers must make spare parts available for 7 years after sales of the product ends. OS updates must be provided for 5 years after the end of sales, and manufacturers must update the OS within 6 months of the source code availability.
Oh my God.
These are all things that, none of this is bad. If every phone manufacturer did this for every device, like I'd be standing up, what is that GIF of the guy standing up, applauding aggressively? Like, that's how I feel about this stuff. But it's a lot to suddenly present to manufacturers and say, from now on, you can't be sold here unless you do all of these things. And I really wonder I often wonder with these kind of regulations and rules, how it impacts the regions outside of the covered area. It seems like a lot for a company to do some of this stuff for one area and none of it for another, or just get the entire company on board. I don't know. And that's a great thing, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of like the conversation we had when the EU demanded USB-C ports. And so so the question became, what is Apple going to do? And Apple's like, a huge company. They could conceivably do this. It's just more like waiting to see what decision they made. And of course, like what aligns with their business interests. I think these are all good things. Like as a consumer, I like these things very much. I will cop to, now I think I could see a generally reasonable argument for stifling innovation for some of these things. And this is interesting why maybe the rollables were exempted, right? Because the foldables, like, so taking foldables is one of my favorite subjects, and rollables and these kind of new form factors, these are, especially these new form factors that are kind of crazy with all these like different mechanical parts, they're a lot less durable than the traditional candy bar phone. And so I just wonder how that plays into it, especially with the exemption for rollables. And I could see that also being a case for innovation might being impeded because, yes, as manufacturers play with certain form factors, barring, the wild things they do for CES and other trade shows, if they actually wanted to sell a niche device, this kind of does hamper it a little bit, because I think when you're selling a niche or putting out a niche, example device, like we talked about like a purse phone on our show before. Like all these things are, I think, honestly, really great in general. But I feel like if they had to make these purse phones, these rollable phones, match all of these guidelines, like the eco-friendly sustainability, I'm willing to kind of be more hardball on, but maybe some of the sustainable parts and even the support parts, like I feel like you could make an argument there that might stifle some of the innovation we are seeing in terms of form factor, just because right now the technology is still building. So durability is kind of like on the, I wouldn't say less prioritized, but it's less, less certain. So
yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, nonetheless, very curious to see kind of the broader impact of rules like these in other markets, maybe even here in the US. How does it influence and impact what we end up seeing here? And very curious to see how that plays out.
Me too. Well, DTNS is made possible by its listeners, thanks to all of you, including Chris Allen, Mark Gibson, Reed Fischler, and welcome our new patron, Mark.
Yeah,
welcome,
Mark. Chris, Mark, Reed, Mark. I'll say it again. You guys are awesome. Thank you. There's more we need to know today. Let's get to the briefs.
Well, Adobe unveiled major updates to its Firefly generative AI platform, including its Firefly Image Model 4 and a more advanced Ultra model. The update improves image and video generation quality, offers more control, advanced features like style transfer and enhanced text generation, and includes a new vector model for creating editable vector-based images. The new Firefly Boards tool enables collaborative mood boarding as well. Adobe did not give a specific timeline for rollout other than to share that the new models are coming soon.
I mean, I work really closely with Adobe tools. So anytime they make these announcements, I'm like, oh, these are tools that I'm probably going to use in some way, shape, or form here coming soon when they roll out. I'm always super curious to see what Adobe's doing. And that vector model creator, that sounds pretty cool, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Play with that. Jason Citron, co-founder and longtime CEO of Discord, has stepped down from his leadership role with the company. He will continue to remain on the board, serving as an advisor to his successor. That's Humam Sakhnini. Sakhnini is former VP at Activision Blizzard, has experience leading major gaming companies through acquisitions and public markets. Discord, of course, is preparing for a possible IPO later this year, and Citron told VentureBeat that the hiring of Sakhnini is a step in the right direction toward that goal. But I mean, that's a long time. He's been with the company for a very long time. So it's, pretty notable.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of folks that a lot of my friends were kind of like, I don't know, surprised by this news, although who knows what's happening might make a lot of sense as said by VentureBeat, given that they're going to IPO soon. But well, TSMC has unveiled its advanced 1.4 nanometer A14 chip manufacturing process set to enter production in 2028. The A14 is expected to power devices from Apple, Intel, and AMD, offering up to 15% better performance and 30% lower power consumption when compared to TSMC's upcoming 2 nanometer chips, thanks to a 20% increase in logic density. The A14 process uses second-generation gate-all-around transistors and an improved NanoFlex Pro architecture. Apple products with these new chips likely won't appear until at least 2029.
Yeah, we got to wait a little bit for that, but wow, that's 1.4 nanometer. That's crazy. It's packing
in those transistors and those bits and bobs.
Indeed,
those are technical terms.
Yes, super technical. It's impressive that we can get to these points, it always amazes me. Motorola launched its new high-end Razr Ultra foldable with a $1,299 price tag. It has a real wood grain back panel design, kind of reminiscent of some of the old Moto design that people know and love. Snapdragon 8 Elite chipset, 16 gigs of RAM. So this is a high-powered device. Obviously, it's got the Ultra moniker. Motorola also announced upgrades to the Razr and Razr Plus foldables. Those are priced at $699 and $999 respectively. They include sturdier titanium hinges and reduced inner display crease visibility, so you won't see that crease as much. All variants include a new AI button that summons Moto capabilities like remember this for saving images, screenshots, and voice notes. So an AI button, it's a thing.
I like this. We're both the future and the past. We've got a wood grain back, but we have an AI button for you. What is more 2025 than that?
Yes, right. It's everything. And the kitchen sink.
The new OnePlus 13T is now officially available in China, armed with a Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Elite processor, a gigantic 6,260 milliamp silicon carbon, by the way, battery, and a large 4,400 square millimeter vapor chamber for cooling. So this 6.32-inch device is thin as well at 8.2 millimeters thickness with a 120 hertz AMOLED display and up to 16 gigabytes of LPDDR5X RAM. Lots of RAM. OnePlus's signature alert slider is unfortunately now gone, but it is replaced by a dedicated action button for things like the flashlight, do not disturb, and camera access. The phone starts at 3,399 yuan. That's approximately $470 USD. And OnePlus is expected to release the 13T globally in the coming months.
Yeah, this is usually how they do it. They release first in the Chinese market, and then usually a couple of months later, they end up widening it out to a more global release. So we will almost certainly see the 13T offered, here and elsewhere. That dedicated action button, I mean, it was there, the Nothing phone that came out, the 3A, I think?
Yeah.
I'm getting my version numbers mixed up, but it has, a similar button that ties into AI features. And I do wonder, if this is going to do that as well,
Yeah. 2025, the year of the dedicated button. OnePlus, Motorola, Sorry, nothing.
And Apple's like, we were there last year. What's old is new again. That's just the way it goes.
That battery is impressive, though, for being so big. Sorry. And so thin.
Silicon carbon. Yeah. I mean, that's OnePlus really leaning into the silicon carbon battery thing. It's worked for them on the watch. And so they're doing it on the smartphone too. Volkswagen of America and Uber have announced a long-term partnership to launch a commercial robotaxi service in the U.S. using autonomous all-electric VW-ID Buzz microbuses. The new service will debut in L.A. and Los Angeles by late 2026. Human safety operators initially in place and then full driverless operations expected by 2027. All of this, of course, is pending regulatory approval. Volkswagen's autonomous mobility subsidiary ADMT will oversee the rollout.
Well, I see your Volkswagen and Uber robotaxi, and I raise you a Tesla robotaxi. Tesla has begun testing its FSD supervised ride-hailing service with employees in Austin, Texas, and the San Francisco Bay Area. This is a key step toward the company's planned launch of its robotaxi service this summer. These tests use existing models or Tesla models like the Model 3 equipped with passenger screens and emergency stop buttons. A safety driver will be present as well. Tesla plans to launch 10 to 20 robotaxis in Austin in June to kick things off.
Yeah. I was going to say 2025, the year of the robotaxi, but I think it's kind of like, it's like 5 years, right? It's taken so long to try to get to these points. It's little baby steps, but it seems to be widening a little bit at this point. And then finally, Perplexity has launched its voice assistant in the iOS app following a delay that was caused by Apple's permissions requirements. The new feature lets iOS users interact with the assistant through conversational voice commands, as you might expect, and you can continue speaking to it even after leaving the app. So I'm curious to see how that works on iOS. However, the iOS version does lack some features that are available on Android, such as screen sharing, camera access, and alarm setting, though you do get tasks like setting reminders, booking restaurant reservations, though you still have to confirm at the end stage, playing media, composing emails, that sort of stuff.
All right. Those are the essentials for today. Let's dive a little deeper in the ongoing stories and follow up.
So, Tom recently returned from his trip to Japan, had a lot of fun there. One topic that came up a lot, apparently, was the differing culture of toilet tech. And Tom spoke with Sean Hollister about some of what they saw while they were there traveling.
Sean, thanks again for joining me to talk about toilets.
Oh my, I can't wait.
I feel like you're not alone. There's a lot of people are from outside of Japan fascinated with the toilets in Japan. I think most famously because they all have the washlet, the spray, the bidet function built in. That's very common in hotels of all levels, not just luxury hotels. I found it rather surprising that they had it in the train station toilet. When I think train station toilet, I don't think fancy. And yet I went into the train station to go to the bathroom, and there it was, the full Japanese toilet experience.
When I first came to Japan 20 years ago, there were Toto washlets, but there were also still plenty of squat over them toilets, the traditional Japanese toilet, the old-fashioned one. And now the Toto washlet is this ubiquitous symbol of hospitality everywhere you go, in every single bathroom that I think I've been to here. I did see one knockoff, but the same idea. And they are so fancy now. I must have tried 8 different varieties, from the basic one that has your buttons on the seat controls, but still has butt washing and bidet functions and heated seat, all the way up to, we went to this little cafe where we went into this fancy bathroom, and this toilet, when we walked in the door, it opened up its lid for us. It started playing a little bit of music. When we finished, it closed the lid automatically. There were buttons on the wall to open both its lid and its secondary, seat pan, so you can get in there with you if you're standing up. You don't have to touch anything. It flushed automatically and walked away. I mean, I figured that's fairly common for U.S. automatic toilets. We got that here, but just close the seat before it does so that no spray ejects the bowl. Beautifully heated before you get there. And in the homestay we did an Airbnb. It's networked, so there's this little panel on the wall that you use to control the toilet, do all its functions. when you flush it using one of the wall buttons, it automatically starts up the vents to eject your smell or whatever, automatically turns those off. It knows when to heat. By the time your butt is on the toilet, it's already warm for you.
How do they do that? The toilet seat is never cold in Japan. Ever.
I don't understand this. I mean, maybe it goes into a power saving mode when you leave the entire house. There must be some kind of smart home sensor here. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I want a Toto washlet. This is my number one takeaway. I'm going to have to get one of these. I know they're very expensive.
And if anyone doesn't quite know what we're talking about, it's got a spray to, like Sean said, clean your butt. It's got a bidet function. Sometimes they have a dryer function as well to dry yourself afterwards, and a flush on the control panel, seat temperature, adjustment for the level of the spray. You can have a nice gentle spray or a more aggressive spray. Am I missing anything?
Oh, the sprays. You can set the sprays to pulsate.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You can change the temperature of the water coming out of the sprays. It can be hotter or cooler. Everything to your liking. Some of them will do like sounds if you want. I saw less of that this time, I want to say, though. Yeah, when I came here 20 years ago, one of the things that we studied in the Japanese language and culture program was this relatively recent phenomenon of people apparently being a little bit embarrassed by their own bodily function sounds. And so there would be a button you could press to make sounds that people would hear a jingle instead of your bodily function.
Yeah.
I didn't see as many of those this time. So I wonder if maybe the embarrassment has left.
The embarrassment never leaves. I can't believe that. There is technology in homes beyond toilets. Like you said, you stayed in an Airbnb. We rented a kind of a condo place in Lake Kawaguchiko, and we were puzzled one morning to find that there was no hot water.
No hot water, yes. The previous evening, being a responsible citizen, I noticed a button that, to my eye, said 24-hour vent. And I noticed that the vent in the bathroom was constantly running. I was like, okay, that's using too much power, right? Let me turn that off. And so the next day I got blamed for there being no hot water. Tom went around to every panel in the house with Google Translate. Aimed it at the thing, and found one in the kitchen that was mysteriously not lit at all.
It really wasn't the Google Translate. It was the fact that it was off. And that one had caught my eye the day before because it had a nice bright blue and red LED with the number 41 and CO2 by it. And I thought, is that some level of carbon dioxide? Is that like a carbon monoxide monitor? Maybe I'm misreading it, but it was off. So I used the Google Translate to figure out how to turn it back on.
And when he did, I saw the katakana letters for gasu. It's like, gas. Oh, and then that little flame popped up, icon popped up on it. And within about 5 minutes, maybe less, we turned on the sink and there was hot water again.
Yeah, that was the crazy part, is we thought, this is going to take a while. Since it was off, it's going to have to take a while to reheat. But it reheated immediately. There was no having to go find it and mess with pilot lights. It just turned itself on. I also discovered that there was a remote bathtub turn-on function because my wife said the water just started coming out of the bathtub when I was messing with that panel.
It sure did. Yeah, he hit the Jido button for that. But the entire bathroom, oh my goodness. In addition to the Toto washlet, I want a Japanese bathroom. The bathroom is actually for the bathing. It's not, the toilet's always in a little separate room, even in the little tiny Airbnb, even in the tiniest hotel that we're in here in Kyoto. It's a separate room, which is completely waterproof. It'll have a shower of some sort, and you can aim it in any which direction without worrying about getting leaking on the floor, because when you go into the bathroom, you close the door, which has rubber seals all around it, as well as a nice automatic vent so you don't get too steamed up in there. And then there's usually a floor that slopes diagonally toward a drain that you can stand on and shower with that water spraying in any direction without worrying about it. The tap in there for the shower head and the bathtub had a faucet that could swing around to the left if you wanted to fill the bucket, or swing around the right to go to the tub. It had an indicator on the dial to get the perfect temperature dialed in. If you wanted to go past the perfect, nice, hot temperature to something more scalding, you would have to press a little button first to indicate that, you're an adult, you're not a kid messing around with the dial. So it was protected. All we had to do was turn the dial as far as it would go before it would click. And there was perfectly hot water at the exact right temperature for a bath coming out of the tap instantly.
And I love that separate design, which I've seen in the US too, but that separate design is everywhere here, where the temperature is separate from the water. So you're not turning the water towards hot to turn it on. Once you find that right temperature in the shower, you can just leave it there and it'll always be the right temperature. And then you turn the water on and off. There is technology outside of the bathroom. in Japan. One thing that I noticed in that condo we stayed in was a projector, because it was a small room, but it gave you that huge screen that a projector gives. And they had built HDMI into the wall. So you could just plug your phone or your laptop or whatever HDMI source into the wall, and it would route it up to the projector for you, which again, not a crazy thing that you couldn't do anywhere else, but it was just kind of a standard feature. This wasn't a luxury condominium.
Yeah, we saw pop-out pollen filters on the walls almost every place we've been in. It looked like this kind of a domed pyramid almost hanging on the wall. And so, what is this thing? And you push on it and it just pops out. And it turned out to be some kind of allergen filter that was just, again, in several of the places we stayed, regardless of how expensive or cheap they were.
A lot of stuff you could do with apps and QR codes too, to do remote control of things. Again, to me, it's not that any of this was stunning. Well, maybe the toilets are, but most of it was not stunning that it could exist, but that it was much more common and much more considered like, oh, this isn't a high-end feature. This is just, your basic living arrangement.
Light switches on the walls that have an LED in them so that whenever the switches are off, it's there for you. I have installed switches like this in my home, smart home switches, and they've added that feature. But to walk into this place and be like, I always know where all the light switches are. Super nice.
Let's finish on toilets again, since that's where we started. I like that often toilet separate from shower. Not in hotels, but in the condo we had, the toilets were all separate. So that if somebody needed, and when I say separate, I don't mean in the same room, like an entirely separate room to go to the toilet.
When you've got a group like we did, especially, you got a couple of kids who are going to need to be in there, a couple of folks, you don't know how long any person's going to take. Somebody else might want to brush their teeth. They can go and do that without worrying about necessarily intruding on the toilet.
One last piece of technology. I don't know if you've got another one, let me know, but the door key system, this is fairly common in other countries as well, but the door key system where you just punch in a code. So you don't have to share keys. You just tell everybody the code. And if it were compromised and somebody overheard the code, you just change the code and then tell everybody the new code. So you never had to be like, do you have your key? Oh, can I get the key? Everybody just knew the code and could come and go as they pleased.
They automatically keyed it to the last 4 digits of my phone number. So I didn't even have to tell everybody. And when we got to the places in Kawaguchiko, and just, hey, what's the last 4 digits of Sean's phone number? We could all get into the apartments and hang out.
If you have feedback about anything that gets brought up on the show, get in touch with us on the socials at DTNS Show on X, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Mastodon at mastodon.social. For TikTok and YouTube, you can find us at Daily Tech News Show.
And we end every episode of DTNS with some shared wisdom. Yesterday, we were talking, or rather, Tom and the gang were talking about the EC's fine against Apple. Part of that fine was for Apple charging developers too much to link out to their own payment systems. And Jen was wondering why the EC didn't say what the right amount would be. And this reminded Tim, who wrote in, of something.
Tim posted on Patreon. You can charge some amount, but what you charge is too much without telling you what percentage price would not be excessive is something that would be extremely familiar to anyone who has dealt with auditors in the business world, both IT and financial auditors, lest anyone think that they're just picking on Apple/Facebook. I still vividly remember this exchange with IT, cybersecurity auditors at one of my first jobs. Auditor, you have too many IT employees who have root access. My manager, how many would be an appropriate number? Auditor, we don't know, but you have too many.
I think what comes to mind for me on this is one of the greatest films of all time, Office Space.
Yes.
If the requirement, if you want me to be wearing 37 pieces of flair, then make the requirement 37 pieces of flair. Kind of the same thing.
Very much so.
I don't know. Yes. Just say what you mean and mean what you say. I would absolutely agree with that. Just, give me a target to shoot for.
Always a good thing. Well, what are you thinking about? Have some insight into a story? Well, share it with us. Feedback at dailytechnewsshow.com.
Big thank you to Sean and Tim for contributing to today's show. Thanks to you for being along for Daily Tech News Show. This show is made possible by our patrons at patreon.com/DTNS. If you want music news in less than 5 minutes, you can check out dailymusicheadlines.com. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
The DTNS family of podcasts, helping each other understand.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.